On the night of October 23, 1856, in Halifax County, Virginia, something that should not have been possible took place. A man who had been shown off like a carnival attraction, examined like a science experiment, and forced to work like an animal for 15 long years finally shattered his chains in the most literal sense. Goliath stood 7 feet 6 inches tall. His hands were large enough to wrap around a grown man's skull the way a child grips an apple. His shoulders were so wide that most doorways required him to turn sideways just to pass through. And on that October night, those same hands that had hauled impossible weights, those same arms that had been measured, judged, laughed at, and abused, became tools of the harshest justice Halifax County had ever seen. By sunrise, 8 white men were dead. The Blackwood family was wiped out completely, and the entire South was forced to learn a frightening truth. No chain exists that can hold a man who chooses death over living in bondage. This is that story, and every part of it is true. But to understand how Goliath became a killer, you must first understand how Cornelius Blackwood turned a human being into a weapon. The auction took place in Richmond, Virginia in September of 1841. Cornelius Blackwood had arrived searching for field hands, strong bodies to labor on his tobacco plantation in Halifax County. What he found instead was something he had never encountered in 40 years of buying slaves. A boy who could not have been more than 15 years old, already standing close to 6 feet tall. Yet it was not only the height that drew attention, it was the build. Arms that hung lower than his knees, hands as wide as dinner plates, feet so large they required handmade shoes, and shoulders so massive they appeared almost misshapen. The auctioneer was nearly drooling. "Gentlemen," he announced, "I present to you the rarest specimen you will ever lay eyes on. Straight from the Dinka region of Africa, a people known for exceptional height. But this one is extraordinary even among them." Cornelius forced his way closer through the crowd. Up close, the boy was even more impressive and unsettling. His eyes were dark and sharp, full of intelligence, watching every movement, studying every white face around him. "Can he work?" Cornelius shouted. "Can this Negro labor like 3 men?" The auctioneer grinned. "I have personally seen him carry 600 pounds across a warehouse without effort. 600 pounds, gentlemen, without strain." The bidding opened at $3,000, already an outrageous price for a single slave. Cornelius raised it to $3,500. A plantation owner from South Carolina countered with $4,000. Cornelius answered with $4,500. The other man hesitated, shook his head, and stepped away. "Too much money sold," the auctioneer cried to Mr. Cornelius Blackwood of Halifax County for $4,500. It was the most expensive slave Cornelius had ever bought. As he studied that massive frame and those enormous hands, his mind was already working. This was not just a field worker. This was entertainment. This was an investment. This would make him wealthy. The boy spoke almost no English when he arrived at Blackwood Plantation. Only a few broken words learned during the brutal journey across the ocean. His African name was impossible for Cornelius to pronounce, filled with sounds that seemed musical and strange. So Cornelius gave him a new name, meant as a joke, a piece of cruel humor pulled from the Bible. "You're Goliath now," he announced at the dinner table that first evening, causing his wife and 2 grown sons to laugh. "The giant who was killed by a small shepherd boy. Seems fitting, doesn't it?" Goliath, the name that would follow him for the rest of his life, stood quietly in the corner of the dining room, his head nearly brushing the ceiling. The house slaves stared at him as if he were some kind of monster. Jacob, Cornelius's youngest son, tossed a piece of bread onto the floor at Goliath's feet. "Pick it up, giant. Let's see you bend." Goliath did not move. He did not even glance down. Jacob rose from his chair, his face burning. "I said pick it up, you big brute." Cornelius spoke calmly but sharply. "Sit down. He does not understand English yet." "Then maybe we should teach him," Jacob replied. He grabbed a riding crop from the wall. The first lash struck Goliath's shoulders. The second cut across the backs of his legs. The third never landed. Goliath slowly turned. For a brief second, Jacob saw something in those eyes that made him step backward, something old and dangerous. "That's enough," Cornelius said, standing and placing himself between his son and his property. "This Negro cost me $4,500. If you damage him, you will pay for it." Do you understand?" Jacob lowered the whip but never looked away. "Yes, father." That night, chained in the cellar where the ceiling was high enough for him to stand, Goliath touched the swollen marks on his shoulders. They barely stung. He had suffered far worse on the slave ship. He knew worse was still to come. But he remembered Jacob's face, the fear that flashed there when he turned. "They should fear me," he thought in his own language. "They should be very afraid." Within a month, Cornelius Blackwood had transformed his newest purchase into the greatest attraction in Halifax County. Every Sunday after church, plantation owners from all over Virginia traveled to Blackwood Plantation. $5 to view, 10 if you wanted demonstrations of strength. Cornelius built a special show area, a large barn cleared out and fitted with benches arranged like a theater or fighting pit. Goliath would be brought out in chains, heavy iron cuffs on his wrists and ankles connected by thick links. He knew enough English now to understand orders, to know exactly what was expected of him. "Lift that," Cornelius would say, pointing to a huge cotton bale weighing at least 300 pounds. Goliath would bend, chains clanking, and raise it onto one shoulder. The crowd would gasp and clap. Women would fan themselves, shocked and excited. Then the water barrel, 400 pounds when full. Goliath would raise it overhead and hold it there as the crowd counted the seconds. 10, 20. Muscles standing out like ropes beneath his skin. But the real excitement came from the fights. "Who wants to see if 3 men can bring down the giant?" Cornelius would shout. There were always volunteers, young overseers, spoiled sons of rich families, sometimes even trained boxers looking for fame. The rules were simple: 3 men against Goliath, no weapons. First to give up loses. If the white men won, they split $50. If Goliath won, he earned extra food for the week. Goliath never lost. They hit him hard. They bruised his eyes, split his lips, cracked ribs. 3 men could hurt even a giant. But Goliath waited. He absorbed the blows until one made a mistake and came too close. Then one massive hand would grab a throat and lift a 200-pound man into the air like a child's toy. The others would rush in, and Goliath would shove them aside with easy motions that sent them crashing to the ground. Most fights ended with at least one man unconscious, and Cornelius Blackwood richer from side bets. "Magnificent, isn't he?" Cornelius would say proudly, accepting praise and whiskey, "worth every dollar." Always a creature to him, never a man. The shows were only for Sundays. From Monday through Saturday, Goliath worked. The tobacco fields of Halifax County were merciless in August. 95 degrees by morning, air so heavy it was hard to breathe. Dozens of slaves cut and bundled plants under the watch of Overseer Thornton. Goliath's role was different. While others carried 40-pound bundles, Goliath carried 300, sometimes 400 pounds at once. Piles so high they hid his head completely. "Faster, giant!" Thornton would yell, snapping his whip. The leather cut into Goliath's shoulders, opening new wounds over old scars. Goliath never slowed, never spoke, moving with a steady rhythm, feet sinking deep into the mud. When others got 15 minutes to drink water, Goliath got 10. When they returned to their cabins at night, Goliath worked an extra hour loading wagons, hauling tools, digging trenches that normally required teams of 6 men. At night he was locked in the barn alone. Special chains had been made for him, links as thick as a wrist, fixed to an iron collar weighing 20 pounds. The chains were bolted to the main beam. His food was dumped into a trough like an animal's. During the first year, he ate only to survive. In the second year he began to understand more English, began to grasp how Cornelius spoke of him like an object, like farm equipment. By the third year something inside him hardened. His eyes lost what little light they once had. The other slaves noticed. Uncle Moses, an old man enslaved for 60 years, watched him closely. "That one is dangerous," Moses whispered. "I saw that look once before on Nat Turner just before the uprising, rebellion." Young Samuel laughed. "He barely talks, he only works. That's why he's dangerous," Moses said. "He's thinking, he's waiting." "Waiting for what?" Moses shook his head. "Pray we never learn." In the 4th year, Dr. Artemus Whitmore entered Goliath's life. Whitmore was a physician from Richmond obsessed with proving racial differences. He claimed black people were a separate species, closer to animals than white men. He measured skulls, bones, muscles. When Cornelius mentioned his 7'6" slave at a gentleman's club, Whitmore nearly dropped his drink. A giant Negro from the Dinka region. My God, I must examine him. This could prove everything. For a price, of course, Cornelius replied smoothly. They came to an agreement. Dr. Whitmore would come once every month and would be paid $20 for each visit, along with any travel costs. In return, he would be allowed to carry out studies on Goliath's body as long as they did not cause lasting harm. The first inspection happened in October of 1845. Goliath was fastened to a rough wooden frame inside the barn, chains tight around his wrists and ankles, arms stretched wide, legs forced apart, leaving him unable to move at all. Dr. Whitmore walked around him slowly, the way a buyer might circle an animal at market, holding a measuring tape in one hand and a notebook in the other. Remarkable, truly remarkable. From toes to the top of the head 90 inches, arm span 96 inches. Skull circumference noted. The doctor's fingers pressed and prodded at Goliath's scalp, his cheeks, his jaw, the heavy brow ridge, the forward set jaw. All of it fits perfectly with my theories about can you feel pain. Cornelius interrupted. His skin looks so thick. Sometimes I wonder if he even feels the whip at all. Dr. Whitmore's eyes brightened with interest. An excellent question, and one we can answer quite easily. He opened his medical bag and took out a scalpel. This might sting a little. The blade sliced a clean line across Goliath's forearm, 3 inches long and 1/4 inch deep. Blood rose immediately to the surface. Goliath clenched his teeth. His eyes shut tight, but he did not scream. He did not even make a sound. Fascinating, no vocal response at all. Perhaps his pain threshold is extremely high. Dr. Whitmore made a second cut, this time across the bicep. Goliath's breathing grew faster. Sweat appeared on his forehead, but still he stayed silent. Incredible self-control. Unless the nervous system itself is different, less responsive, we should continue. The third cut was deeper, drawn across his chest. Blood streamed down Goliath's torso in thin red lines, and then at last there was a sound, low and rough, deep in the throat, not quite a growl and not quite a moan, something raw and ancient. Dr. Whitmore stepped back, clearly satisfied. So he does feel pain, he said calmly. He simply has an extraordinary tolerance for it. I'll write that down. He turned to Cornelius. Next month I'd like to study his muscles more closely. Perhaps take some tissue samples. Will it affect his ability to work? Cornelius asked. Very little. Just a few small cuts, nothing serious. Then we have a deal. The examinations continued every month for the next 2 years. Whitmore arrived each time with new tools, new ideas to test, new places to cut, measure, and explore. He removed bone samples from Goliath's ribs. He measured his lung capacity by forcing his head under water in a trough until he nearly drowned. He tested his sight, his hearing, his reactions, all for the sake of science. All the while, Goliath remained chained, unable to fight back, unable to say no. Through all of it, he never screamed, never begged, never gave them what they wanted. But behind his dull, empty eyes something was growing. Pressure like water building behind a dam, like fire trapped beneath a mountain. Something that could not stay buried forever. In the 7th year Naomi arrived. She came as part of a group of house slaves shipped from South Carolina, sold after a plantation owner died and his estate was broken apart. She was small and fragile, maybe 5 feet 2 inches tall, with fast fingers perfect for sewing and cooking. Master Blackwood bought her for $800 to help his wife run the main house. The first time Goliath saw Naomi, she was hanging laundry behind the house. He was carrying timber for a new tobacco barn, a load that would have taken 6 normal men to lift. 400 pounds of oak rested across his shoulders. Their eyes met for just a second. Naomi looked away quickly. House slaves were not supposed to acknowledge field hands. Different ranks, different lives. But Goliath could not stop looking. He watched her move lightly between the hanging sheets, humming softly to herself. It was the humming that stopped him. The tune was from his childhood, a song his mother used to sing. After unloading the timber, Goliath did something he had never done before. He took a longer path back to the barn, one that passed close to the laundry lines, close enough that Naomi had to notice him. She stopped humming and stared up at him, taking in his size, his presence, this man who seemed almost unreal. "You know that song," he said in English, his voice rough from years of silence. She nodded slowly. "My grandmother taught it to me before she was sold farther south. She said it came from the old land. It does." Goliath closed his eyes. For a moment, he was no longer in Virginia. He stood in tall grass near the Nile's branches, listening to his mother's voice drift over the water. "It's about the river, about home." When he opened his eyes, Naomi was smiling. It was small and sad, but it was still a smile. "I'm Naomi, Goliath. That's not your real name." "No, but it's the only one they allow me to keep." What followed grew slowly and carefully. On Sunday evenings, after the work and the exhibitions were done, they found small moments together. Sometimes only a few minutes, sometimes, if luck was kind, nearly an hour. They could not touch, not in the open, not where anyone might see. Slaves caught mixing across rolls could be whipped or worse, and Goliath was far too valuable for Master Blackwood to risk any trouble. Still, they talked in quiet corners, in stolen moments between chores. Naomi taught Goliath more English, better English, the kind that let him understand real conversations, not just orders. He learned the meaning behind the words Master Blackwood spoke to his sons, the letters Dr. Whitmore read aloud about his strange and fascinating subject. In return, Goliath told Naomi about the homeland, the true names of things, the old gods, the way the sun fell over endless grasslands. "You remember it?" she asked one night, amazement in her voice. "You were so young when you were taken." "I remember everything," Goliath said. His massive hands, hands that could shatter bone, traced soft lines in the dirt. "I remember my mother's face, my father's laugh. The day the slavers came, I remember it all, and I keep those memories like weapons. Weapons. One day," he said quietly, "I will need something to fight for. Something more than just staying alive. Those memories, this moment, that is what I will fight for." In March of 1853, Master Blackwood agreed to a strange arrangement. If two slaves wished to marry, not legally of course, since slaves could not marry, but to live together, he would allow it under certain rules. Both slaves had to belong to his plantation, and any children born would belong to him from the moment of birth. Naomi first went to Mistress Constance Blackwood, as custom demanded. Constance looked at the small house slave with mild amusement. "You want to marry the giant, child. He'll snap you in half." "No, ma'am," Naomi said softly. "He is the gentlest man I've ever known, gentle. I've seen him fight. I've seen him choose not to hurt people when he easily could. There's a difference." Constance shrugged. "Ask the master. If he agrees, I won't stand in the way. It might be interesting to see what kind of children you make. Maybe we'll get more giants." Cornelius reacted much the same way. He saw money in the idea of breeding his most valuable slave. If Naomi bore giant children, each could be sold for a fortune. If not, there was nothing to lose. "You have my permission," he told Goliath. "You can move into the small cabin behind the quarters, the one meant for married couples." Goliath looked at him closely. "And the chains? Will I still wear them at night?" Cornelius thought for a moment. Goliath had been his slave for 12 years. He had never caused trouble, never tried to escape. The chains were mostly for show. "Fine, no chains in the cabin. But if you try to run, I'll sell your wife to the furthest plantation I can find. Do you understand?" "I understand." That night, for the first time in 12 years, Goliath slept without chains. Naomi lay beside him, her small body warm against his massive frame, her breathing calm and steady. He stayed awake for hours, one arm wrapped around her protectively, staring at the ceiling. "This is what freedom feels like," he thought. "Even here, even like this moment is freedom." He should have known it would not last. By 1856, Goliath and Naomi had been together for 3 years. There were no children yet, which disappointed Master Blackwood, though he told himself to be patient. What he did not know was that Naomi had been using herbs to prevent pregnancy, old knowledge passed down from her grandmother, wild carrot seeds, rue leaves. She took them in secret every day. "I won't bring a child into this life," she told Goliath. "I won't give them another body to sell." Goliath understood, though deep inside, a quiet part of him still wished for a child, something truly his in a world where he owned nothing. In August of that year, the herbs failed, or perhaps Naomi stopped taking them. Goliath never asked. One morning she woke sick and vomiting, then smiled through her tears. "I think I'm pregnant." Something inside Goliath cracked open, not breaking but opening like a door he had kept shut for years, swinging wide. "Pregnant," he whispered. "I'm sorry." I tried. He kissed her gently, careful of his strength. "Don't ever apologize for this." For 3 months they kept it hidden. Naomi wore loose dresses and avoided close inspection, but by October it could no longer be concealed. Mistress Constance noticed first. "Are you with child, girl?" Naomi hesitated, then nodded. "Well, it's about time. The master will be pleased. Tell him tonight." That evening, as Naomi served roasted duck and sweet potatoes, she quietly told Master Blackwood. His face split into that terrible smile Goliath had learned to fear. "Excellent. Now we'll see if he passes on his size. If this child is a giant, I'll have a breeding pair. Do you know what that's worth?" Standing silent in the corner, Goliath felt that opening in his chest turn dark and dangerous. 3 days later, Marcus Doyle arrived at Blackwood Plantation. Doyle was a slave trader, one of the most successful in Virginia. He dealt in special merchandise, slaves who brought high prices, beautiful women for rich homes, powerful men for brutal labor, and occasionally things far more unusual. There was a market, Doyle told Cornelius as they sat with cigars and whiskey, for pregnant slave women, especially those with unusual bloodlines. "Look at these rich men in New Orleans," he said. "They're bored with ordinary breeding. They want oddities, experiments. Your giant woman, how tall is she?" "About 5 feet, 5'1", 5'2". Cornelius nodded. 5'2". "Perfect," Doyle said, "and she's carrying his child. That alone makes her rare, half giant, half normal. Doctors in Louisiana would pay well for that." Doyle spread his hands slowly. $3,000 for her." Cornelius raised his brows. "3,000. I paid 800. That was before she was carrying giant seed. Now she's one of a kind. But if she gives birth to a giant child here, I could—" Doyle cut him off. "That's a big if. The baby might come out normal-sized, might not live at all. Small women giving birth to giant babies usually don't survive. High death rate. Better a bird in the hand." "Cornelius, 3,000 now. Or maybe 5,000 in a year and a half, if everything goes right, plus all the risk." Cornelius rolled the whiskey in his glass. "When would you need her?" "I leave for New Orleans the day after tomorrow. She comes with me. Let me think about it." That night Cornelius did the math. 3,000 right away versus a possible 5,000 later. But that future money came with danger. If the baby died, if Naomi died, his investment would be gone by morning. By dawn he had decided. He found Goliath in the tobacco barn, stacking dried leaves onto a wagon. "I sold your wife," Cornelius said flatly. No warning, no kindness. Goliath froze. The heavy load in his hands slipped and smashed onto the dirt floor. "What?" Doyle made a strong offer. "She leaves tomorrow morning." "No," the word came out broken. "No, you can't. I can, and I did. She's my property. Same as you, same as that wagon. I sell what I want, and the baby belongs to me too. Doyle wants to see what it becomes. Giant or not, it's science." Something crossed Goliath's face, a flash of anger he couldn't hide. Cornelius stepped back and shouted, "Thorn, bring the chains." Overseer Thornton appeared with iron shackles, the heavy kind they used for Sunday displays. "Just in case," Cornelius said. "Until you cool off. Don't want you doing anything foolish." They chained him, wrists and ankles linked with thick iron, bolting him to the main beam of the barn, and there Goliath stood helpless as the sun set on his final night with Naomi. She came to him after dark. Somehow she had talked Mistress Constance into allowing a goodbye. 5 minutes, Constance said sharply. No more. Naomi ran to him, her small hands reaching for his face. He bent down and pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Don't," he said, his voice breaking. "This isn't your fault. Our child will be born free." He pulled back and looked into her eyes. "I swear it. I will find you. I will buy your freedom. Our child will never wear chains." Naomi cried silently, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Don't promise what you can't do." "I keep my promises." "Time's up," Constance called. Naomi slipped something into his chained hand, a scrap of cloth torn from her dress, the only thing she truly owned. "Remember me," she whispered. Then she was gone, dragged away, her sobs echoing through the barn until only silence remained. Goliath stood alone in the dark, chained to wood, holding the cloth, while something inside him, Something crushed for 15 years finally broke. Morning came. Doyle's wagon waited in front of the big house, horses stamping the ground. Naomi was brought out in chains lighter than Goliath's but still iron. Her face was stained with tears, eyes swollen and red. Everyone came to watch. Master Blackwood, Mistress Constance, the sons Jacob and Nathaniel Jr., Overseer Thornton, and Dr. Whitmore, who had arrived for his monthly visit and stayed for the show. Goliath was still chained in the barn, placed where he could see. Doyle shoved Naomi into the wagon like freight, offering no help. She stumbled and grabbed the edge. "You made a fine bargain," Cornelius, Doyle called happily. "I'll write you from New Orleans. Let you know what she gives birth to." "Do that," Cornelius replied. "I'm curious." The wagon rolled forward. Naomi turned, searching the faces until she found Goliath. Their eyes met and she screamed. Not words, just raw pain, the sound of something shattered forever. Goliath pulled at his chains once, twice. Iron cut into his wrists, blood running, but the links held. Blackwood laughed. "Easy there, giant. You'll hurt yourself." Goliath pulled again. The chains groaned, the beam creaked. "Thornton," Blackwood said, "drug him if needed." But Goliath stopped. He stood still, watching the wagon disappear down the long road, watching until the dust settled. When he turned back, those who saw him later swore his eyes had changed, flat and empty like a shark or a snake. Uncle Moses, standing with the field hands, whispered to young Samuel, "I told you." Ned Turner had that same look before Southampton ran red. "What will he do?" Samuel asked. "Something awful," Moses said. "And soon." They kept Goliath chained for a week. No work, little food, barely water. Cornelius wanted the anger gone before trusting him again. On the 8th day Thornton came to unlock him. "Master says you can work. One wrong move and you're back in irons, understand?" Goliath nodded slowly. "Good. We're behind on harvest." Thornton stepped back as he unlocked the chains, old habits guiding him. Something felt wrong. The giant was too calm, too focused. "Wash up," Thornton ordered. "Then head to the fields." Goliath washed at the trough outside the barn, scrubbing away a week of dirt. As he did, he noticed something new. The blacksmith shop was only 30 yards away. Through the open door he saw Josiah at the forge, shaping iron. On the wall hung tools, hammers, chisels, blades, weapons. For 15 years he had passed that shop without thought. Why would he think of it? He was broken. Property, but now his mind counted everything: space, distance, use, move. Thornton snapped, cracking his whip near Goliath's feet. Goliath walked, but his eyes studied the land. The big house had 3 doors. The front stayed locked at night, but the kitchen door stayed open until 10. Thornton made his rounds at 5:30 each morning, always alone at first. Blackwood kept a rifle in his study and a pistol in his bedroom, but he couldn't shoot well. Goliath had heard him complain about missing a deer at 20 yards. The sons slept in the east wing upstairs, windows facing the tobacco barn. Dr. Whitmore came every 3rd Thursday and stayed overnight in the first-floor guest room. Pete, the driver, lived alone in his own cabin, rewarded for loyalty and betrayal. Details, weak points. For the first time in 15 years, Goliath planned more than survival. He planned justice. That night in the small cabin he once shared with Naomi, sleep would not come. The room felt hollow without her, filled with echoes of her voice, her warmth, the way she pressed into him. He sat on the floor. The bed was too small anyway. 3 months until Naomi gave birth. 3 months until he never saw his child. 3 months of Blackwood making money from their pain. No, the thought cut sharp. No more waiting, no more hoping. No more believing obedience would earn mercy. He had been patient for 15 years, and what did it bring? His wife sold, his child taken, his body used like a show piece. He pulled the cloth from beneath the floorboard and pressed it to his face. Her smell was fading. "I promised you," he whispered. "I promised our child freedom. I keep my promises. But how does a slave free anyone? He had no money, no allies, no power but his body unless he took power." The idea should have scared him. Instead, it filled him with hope. Dark, violent hope. The next morning, Goliath began as there was a market, Doyle explained to Cornelius as they smoked cigars and drank whiskey, for pregnant enslaved women, especially those with unusual genetics. "Look at those rich men in New Orleans," he said. "They are bored with normal breeding programs. They want experiments, oddities. Your giant woman, she is what, 5 feet 5'2"? Cornelius nodded. 5'2". Perfect, Doyle said. And she is carrying his child. That alone is a curiosity. Half giant, half ordinary. There are medical men in Louisiana who would pay, Doyle paused for effect, $3,000 for her. Cornelius lifted his eyebrows. 3,000. I paid 800. That was before she was carrying giant seed. Now she is rare, one of a kind. But if she gives birth to a giant child here, I could. Doyle cut him off. The key word is could. The baby might come out normal-sized. It might not survive at all. Small women giving birth to giant babies, well, the death rate is high. Better a bird in the hand, Cornelius. 3,000 now, or maybe 5,000 in 18 months, plus all the risk. Cornelius swirled the whiskey in his glass. When would you need her? I leave for New Orleans the day after tomorrow. She would come with me. Let me think about it. That night Cornelius did his numbers. 3,000 right away versus a possible 5,000 later. But that future money came with danger. If the child died, if Nomi died, he would lose everything he had invested. By morning he had decided. He found Goliath in the tobacco barn, stacking dried leaves onto a wagon. I sold your wife, Cornelius said flatly, with no warning and no pity. Goliath froze. The heavy load he was lifting slipped from his hands and crashed to the barn floor. What? Marcus Doyle made a fine offer. She leaves tomorrow morning. No. The word came out tight and broken. No, you cannot. I can, and I did. She is my property, Goliath, same as you, same as that wagon. I sell what I want, and the baby is also mine. Doyle is interested in it, wants to see if it turns out giant or not. It is for science. Something crossed Goliath's face, some flash of anger he could not hide, because Cornelius stepped back and shouted, Thorn, bring the chains. Overseer Thornton appeared with iron shackles, the heavy kind, the ones used for Sunday shows. Just to be safe, Cornelius said. Until you calm down. Cannot have you doing something foolish. They chained him, wrists and ankles linked together, the iron thick as a man's thumb, and bolted him to the central beam of the barn. Goliath stood there helpless as the sun went down on his last night with Naomi. She came to him after dark. Somehow she had begged Mistress Constance to let her say goodbye. 5 minutes, Constance said sharply. That is all. Naomi ran to him, her small hands reaching for his face. He bent down, resting his forehead against hers. I am sorry, she whispered. I am so sorry. Do not, his voice broke. This is not your fault. The baby will be born free. He pulled back and looked into her eyes. I swear it. Somehow, I will find you. I will buy your freedom. Our child will never wear chains. Naomi was crying now, quiet tears running down her cheeks. Do not make promises you cannot keep. I keep every promise. Time is up, Mistress Constance called. No, please, just one more moment. Naomi pushed something into Goliath's chained hand, a strip of cloth torn from her dress, the only thing she truly owned. Remember me, she whispered. Then she was gone, pulled away by Mistress Constance, her sobbing echoing through the barn until it faded. Goliath stood alone in the dark, chained to the beam, gripping the scrap of cloth, and something inside him, something crushed and held down for 15 years, finally broke. Morning arrived. Marcus Doyle's wagon waited in front of the big house, horses stamping the ground. They brought Naomi out in chains lighter than Goliath's, but chains all the same. She was still crying, her face smeared, eyes swollen and red. Everyone gathered to watch. Master Blackwood, Mistress Constance, the 2 sons Jacob and Nathaniel Jr., Overseer Thornton, and Dr. Whitmore, who had come for his monthly visit and chose to stay to watch, and Goliath still chained in the barn, placed near the door so he could see it all. Doyle loaded Naomi into the wagon like freight. He did not help her climb, just shoved her. She stumbled and caught herself on the edge. You made a very good deal, Cornelius, Doyle called out happily. I will write you from New Orleans, let you know if she gives birth to a giant or not. Do that, Cornelius replied. I am curious. The wagon rolled forward. Naomi turned, scanning the crowd until her eyes met Goliath's. Their looks locked, and then she screamed, not words, just raw pain, the sound of something breaking forever. Goliath pulled against his chains once, twice. The iron cut into his wrists and blood ran, but the chains held. Master Blackwood laughed. Easy, giant, you will hurt yourself. Goliath pulled harder. The chains creaked. The wooden beam groaned. Thornton, sedate him if you must. But Goliath stopped. He stood still, watching the wagon vanish down the long road, watching until the dust settled. When he turned back, everyone later said his eyes had changed, flat and cold, like a shark's or a snake's. Uncle Moses, standing with the field hands, whispered to young Samuel, "I told you. Ned Turner had eyes like that, right before Southampton ran with blood. What will he do?" Samuel whispered. "Something awful," Moses said. And soon, they kept Goliath chained for a full week after Naomi was taken. No work, just locked in the barn with barely enough food and water. Cornelius wanted to be sure the anger faded before sending him back to work. On the 8th day, Overseer Thornton came to unlock him. "Master says you can work again. One wrong move and you are back in chains. Understand?" Goliath nodded slowly. "Good, we are behind on harvest because you have been sulking." Thornton unlocked the shackles and stepped back fast. Old habit. Something felt wrong about the giant that morning. Too calm, too steady. "Clean yourself up," Thornton said. "Then go to the tobacco fields." Goliath walked to the water trough and washed the dirt from his face and arms. As he did, he noticed something new. The blacksmith shop was only 30 yards away. Through the open door he saw Josiah at the forge, shaping horseshoes, and on the wall inside hung tools, hammers, chisels, cutting blades, weapons. For 15 years he had passed that shop daily and never thought about it. Why would he? He was property, obedient, broken. But now his mind counted everything: the space, the tools, the chances. "Move," Thornton snapped, cracking the whip near his feet. Goliath moved, but as he walked toward the fields, his eyes followed every detail of the plantation. Things he had never cared about before. The big house had 3 doors. The front stayed locked at night, but the kitchen door stayed open until 10. Thornton made his rounds every morning at 5:30, starting at the quarters and moving clockwise, always alone at first. Master Blackwood kept a rifle in his study and a pistol in his bedroom, but he could not shoot well. Goliath had heard him complain about missing a deer at 20 yards. The 2 sons slept in the east wing upstairs, windows facing the tobacco barn. Whitmore came every 3rd Thursday, stayed the night, slept in the first-floor guest room. The driver, Pete, an enslaved man rewarded for loyalty, had his own cabin apart from the others. Facts, weak spots, openings. For the first time in 15 years, Goliath was planning more than survival. He was planning justice. That night, alone in the small cabin he had shared with Naomi, Goliath could not sleep. The space felt huge without her, full of ghosts. Her laugh, her breath, the way she curled into him as if trying to vanish into his warmth. He sat on the floor. The bed was too small for him anyway, and he only used it because Naomi liked it. 3 months until she would give birth. 3 months until he would never see his child. 3 months of Master Blackwood earning money from their pain. No, the thought came sharp and clear. No more waiting, no more hoping. No more believing obedience would earn anything but more chains. He had been patient for 15 years, the perfect slave. And what had it given him? His wife sold, his child taken before birth, his body studied and displayed like a show animal. Goliath reached under the floorboard and pulled out Naomi's cloth. He pressed it to his face. Her scent was already fading. "I promised you," he whispered to the empty room. "I promised our child would be born free, and I keep my promises. But how? How does a slave, even a giant one, free anyone?" He had no money, no allies, no power except his strength, unless he made power, unless he took it. The thought should have scared him. Instead, he felt something new. Hope, dark, violent hope. The next morning, Goliath began his terrible heavy paw. It did not survive. The delivery went wrong. Too much blood. "I am sorry, Cornelius. I know you were hoping for a strong breeding pair." Master Blackwood cursed quietly. "Damn it. Still, I earned my 3,000. A prophet is a prophet. And I have another offer if you want it. A plantation in Mississippi needs special labor. They have heard about your giant. They will pay 8,000 if you sell." Dead. Naomi was dead. The child too. His child. A son or a daughter, he would never know. Gone. Everything he had endured. Everything he had survived. Every plan he carried inside him. All of it meant nothing now. She was gone anyway. The world felt unsteady. Goliath's sight narrowed to the window where Master Blackwood and Marcus Doyle calmly spoke about money while announcing the death of his family. "Boy, boy." The overseer's voice broke through the fog. Thornton stood beside him, whip in hand. "What are you doing? Get back to work." Goliath turned slowly. From his great height, he looked down. Something in his eyes made Thornton step back, made his hand move toward his pistol. "Now wait." Goliath moved faster than anyone expected. His hand closed around Thornton's throat and lifted him. The overseer struggled, gasping, panic spread. Someone screamed. But Goliath was already walking, carrying Thornton as if he weighed nothing. Moving toward the big house, toward the porch where Blackwood and Doyle appeared, drawn by the noise. "Goliath, stop. Put him down." Blackwood's voice shook. Goliath tightened his grip. Thornton went still. Goliath let him fall and kept walking. Blackwood raised his pistol with shaking hands. "Stop, or I will shoot." The gun fired. Pain ripped through Goliath's shoulder. He barely slowed. Another shot struck his chest. He dropped to one knee, breathing hard, blood soaking his shirt. Still, he looked up. His eyes were clear, focused, burning. "You sold my wife," Goliath said. "My child. They were property," Blackwood answered weakly. Goliath forced himself upright. "Then you will see what property can do." He moved forward. More shots rang out. One hit his leg. It did not stop him. He reached the porch and burst through the door. Inside, screams echoed. People ran. Panic filled the house. Goliath moved through it like a storm. "You mocked us. You laughed. You treated us as less than human." I remember one by one, the people who had hurt him fled or fell silent before him. He did not shout. He did not rush. He moved with purpose. Upstairs, another tried to threaten him. The weapon failed. Goliath disarmed him easily. Fear filled the hallway. Then it was over. In a guest room, the doctor froze when he saw Goliath. Excuses spilled out. Research, orders, rules. "You treated me like an object," Goliath said. "Like something to be measured, not a man." The doctor begged. Goliath ended it quickly. No cruelty. No mercy, just an end. Outside, the plantation erupted. Gunshots, shouts, then a choice follow, or stay chained. Uncle Moses stood tall. "Tonight," he shouted. "Tonight we choose freedom." Weapons appeared. Tools, knives, chains. People stood together for the first time. The driver tried to hide. It did not save him. Back in the house, Goliath found Cornelius Blackwood shaking in his study. Threats poured out, empty and weak. "You will die," Blackwood said. "Yes," Goliath replied calmly. "I paid for you. You were mine. I was never yours. I was waiting." He lifted Blackwood easily. "My wife's name was Naomi. My child died before breathing air. You sold them like numbers on a page. It was business. It was my life." Goliath carried him to the window, the view Blackwood loved so much. "Look at it one last time." He let him go. The night swallowed the scream. Goliath stood at the window, breathing hard. Below, the people gathered, afraid, hopeful, free. Marcus Doyle tried to escape. The wagon would not move fast enough. "You spoke of her death like it meant nothing," Goliath said. "I did not think," Doyle cried. "You never did. She was carrying my child. You knew the risk. You took the money anyway." Doyle begged, offered money. "Promises. 3,000, Goliath said quietly. "That was the price you paid. And tonight, the debt was answered." "What was my child worth?" He leaned down, his huge body towering over the trembling man. "Let me show you what your life is worth." Goliath grabbed the chains hooked to Doyle's wagon, the very chains Doyle used to lock up his goods. 20 pounds of iron, strong enough to restrain 3 grown people. Goliath looped them around Doyle's neck. "Please, please," Doyle begged, but Goliath was finished listening to white men beg for mercy. He pulled hard. The chains tightened. Doyle's face turned red, then deep purple. His hands scratched uselessly at the iron, biting into his skin. Goliath did not stop until long after Doyle stopped moving. When it was finished, 8 bodies lay spread across Blackwood Plantation. Master Cornelius Blackwood lay broken on the ground beneath his study window. Mistress Constance Blackwood was found dead in her parlor chair, fear having stopped her heart. Jacob Blackwood lay crushed against a wall. Nathaniel Blackwood Jr. had his skull smashed. Overseer Thornton's neck was snapped clean. Dr. Artemis Whitmore had 23 cuts, far too many to survive. Driver Pete was left unrecognizable after the mob finished with him. Marcus Doyle lay strangled by his own chains. The sun sank over Halifax County, painting the sky a deep blood red. In the center of it all stood Goliath, covered in wounds and blood, his own mixed with that of others. Around him stood 40 freed slaves, staring at him with a look caught somewhere between fear and awe. "What do we do now?" Samuel asked. Goliath looked north, toward freedom, toward the mountains where he had heard runaways could disappear, toward something beyond slavery. "We run," he said plainly. "We find others like us, and we never stop fighting." Uncle Moses stepped closer. "Boy, you're bleeding bad." "Those gunshots," Goliath said. "I know." He could feel his strength draining, feel the blood loss catching up to him. "But not yet, not quite yet. The militia will come," Rebecca warned. "By morning they'll have soldiers hunting us. Then we leave tonight." Goliath looked at every face watching him. "Anyone who wants to stay can stay. Anyone who wants freedom comes with me. We head for the Blue Ridge Mountains. There are maroon communities there, places where former slaves live free." "That's 300 miles, Josiah said. "Then we better start walking." The escape began at midnight. 53 slaves, every person from Blackwood Plantation, along with a few from nearby farms who had heard what happened and chose to risk everything, vanished into the Virginia wilderness. They traveled by night and hid during the day. Uncle Moses knew which routes were safe to eat, which paths to take, which Quaker families would hide runaways under false wagon floors. Still, the journey was brutal, harder than any of them had imagined. On the second night, slave catchers found their trail. Bloodhounds howled in the darkness, torches flickered through the trees. Goliath turned to face them alone and told the others to keep going. "You can't fight them all," Ruth said. "I can slow them down." The slave catchers expected frightened runaways. Hungry, weak, desperate people ready to surrender. They did not expect a 7'6" giant to burst from the darkness like an angry god. The fight was short and savage. 3 slave catchers were killed before the rest ran, shaken by what they had seen. A massive man soaked in blood, shouting in a language they did not understand, swinging a broken chain as if it weighed nothing. They later claimed the giant was possessed or immune to bullets. Neither was true. Fear simply makes men believe whatever helps them sleep. 2 weeks later, the group reached the Blue Ridge Mountains. They had lost people along the way. 4 were captured by patrols. 2 died from their injuries. 1 turned back, choosing familiar slavery over uncertain freedom. But 46 made it. 46 people who had once been property now lived in a hidden community of former slaves and free black people who had built something incredible. A town. Real cabins. Gardens. Children laughing in freedom. The community elder, a woman named Grace who had escaped 30 years earlier, studied them carefully. "You're the ones from Blackwood Plantation," she said. It was not a question. "We are," Goliath said. "We heard 8 died in one night. Biggest uprising Virginia has seen since Nat Turner. They've put a $15,000 bounty on you." "I know," Grace smiled. "Go come in. You're safe here. For now." For 4 years, Goliath lived in the mountains. The community grew. More runaways arrived, carrying stories of the giant of Virginia, the man who killed 8 white men and led an army of slaves to freedom. Each telling grew bigger. By 1857, some said he killed 20 men. By 1858, 30. Goliath never corrected them. Legends gave people courage. Across Virginia, quiet rebellions spread. Fires in kitchens that killed masters. Overseers found dead in accidents. Slaves walking away and never returning. The system began to crack. The name Goliath, once used to mock him, became something else. A promise, a warning. The man could die, but the idea of the giant could not. In October of 1860, Goliath was repairing a cabin when the militia finally arrived. 200 armed men from the Virginia National Guard. They had spent 3 years hunting rumors, searching every valley and ridge, until they finally found the maroon community. Grace rang the warning bell. "They're coming." Everyone moved to their positions. The community had prepared for this day. 46 had become 80. 80 people who chose death over slavery, who had trained and planned. Still, 200 soldiers were too many. "We can't win," Josiah said quietly, his hair gray now. "No," Goliath said. "But we can make them remember." He faced the people he had lived beside, laughed with, helped raise children with. "Anyone who can run, run. Go deep into the mountains. They can't catch everyone." "What about you?" Ruth asked. Goliath smiled. "I'll buy you time." "That's suicide," Samuel said. "I've been dead since they stole me from Africa. This is just my body catching up." He would not argue. He took what weapons they had, a hunting rifle with 7 shot, 2 pistols with 12 shots total, and his chains, the same ones he had broken years earlier, now cleaned and deadly. Then he walked out alone to face an army. The militia expected a siege. Instead, Goliath stepped out of the tree line by himself, 7'6", scarred, massive, holding a rifle like a child's toy. Captain Morrison stared in disbelief. "That's him. That's the giant. Shoot him," someone said. "No," Morrison replied. "I want him alive. I want every slave to see him hang." "You're surrounded," Morrison shouted. "Surrender and you'll get a trial." Goliath answered by firing. The bullet struck Morrison's shoulder, spinning him around. Rifles exploded all at once. Most shots missed, but some hit. Bullets tore through Goliath's body. He staggered but did not fall. Then he charged. The soldiers had never seen anything like it. A man taking bullets and still coming. Goliath smashed into them like a storm. Chains cracked jaws, rifle stocks crushed skulls, hands grabbed, lifted, and threw men aside. He was shot 9 times in the first minute, 11 more in the second. Still, he fought. One soldier later wrote, "It wasn't human. We shot it again and again, and it kept coming. Like trying to kill a mountain." By the 3rd minute, 20 soldiers were down. Goliath dropped to his knees, blood pouring from too many wounds. When a young officer stepped close, Goliath grabbed the rifle, bent the barrel, and collapsed. They fired 14 more shots, 37 bullets in total. It still took 3 hours for him to die. His body was dragged to Richmond and displayed for a week. They thought it would stop rebellion. Instead, it taught a lesson. It takes 37 bullets to kill a free man, and even then he dies standing. Within 6 months, more uprisings followed. By 1861, plantations began to fail. Slaves walked away openly. The legend of Goliath spread everywhere. Frederick Douglass spoke of him in 1862. "They call him a monster. I call him a man who chose death over slavery, and in doing so showed us how to live." Today, Halifax County keeps quiet about Goliath. Records call it a tragic slave uprising and property damage, as if people could be property. But in black communities the story still lives. A man stolen from Africa, abused, broken, who lost his wife and unborn child, who finally broke his chains, killed 8 men in one night, led 50 people to freedom, and stood alone against an army until his final breath. They called him Goliath, the giant who would not kneel. He fell. Or so they said. But he never really fell. Not in the way they wanted. Because even now, more than 160 years later, people still say his name. His story is still passed from mouth to mouth, and every time someone truly listens, not just hears but listens, they learn the same lesson Goliath taught Halifax County on that night in October. Chains can be snapped, masters can bleed, and freedom is always worth the cost, no matter how high that cost may be. In 1923, a historian from Howard University came to Halifax County to study slave uprisings. He spoke with descendants of enslaved people from nearby plantations. These were people whose grandparents had seen what was left behind after that October night. One woman, 93 years old, told him a story she had heard as a child. "My grandmother was a house slave on the Morrison plantation 2 miles from Blackwood. She said that the morning after, they could see smoke rising from where the big house once stood. Master Morrison gathered all his slaves, about 40 of them, and told them what had happened. A slave named Goliath killed his master and 7 others, he said, and led a rebellion. They are hunting him now. Anyone who helps runaways will be hanged with them." He meant it as a threat, as fear. But my grandmother said when she looked around at the other slaves, she did not see fear. She saw something else. Something Master Morrison could not understand because he had never felt it. Hope. That very night 3 slaves from the Morrison plantation ran away. They vanished into the dark. Master Morrison offered money. He sent slave catchers. He threatened the ones who stayed. No one spoke. No one knew anything. Within a year 5 more were gone. By 1865, when freedom finally arrived, only half of the original slaves remained. The rest had followed Goliath's path. My grandmother told me that giant did not just kill 8 white men. He killed the idea that we had to accept slavery. He showed us we could resist. We could fight. We could win. We could be free even if freedom meant death. The historian wrote down her story along with many others. But his work was never published. Too dangerous, too upsetting. White publishers in the 1920s had no interest in stories that honored slave resistance. The manuscript sat locked away at Howard University for 70 years until 1993, when a graduate student discovered it and finally shared those stories from the Virginia mountains. The Maroon community that Goliath helped create survived until 1863. When the Emancipation Proclamation was announced, the 80 people living there faced a choice: stay hidden or come down from the mountains into a world that suddenly called them free. Most stayed. Freedom on paper was not freedom in life, not in Virginia, not in 1863. But some went down to see for themselves. Uncle Moses was one of them. He was 88 years old, very old by any measure. He walked into the town of Halifax and stood in the middle of the square where slaves had been sold for generations. A crowd formed. White people were tense and angry. Black people were shocked and afraid at the same time. Moses stood there for an hour. Just stood, daring anyone to question his right to be there. No one did. At last he spoke. His voice carried across the square. I once knew a man, a giant, 7 feet 6 inches tall. The strongest man I ever met, the bravest too. They beat him, studied him like an animal, sold his wife, killed his child. And when he had suffered all a man could suffer, he stood up, broke his chains, and showed the whole South that we are not property, we are not animals, we are human beings, and human beings die free or not at all. His name was Goliath. I watched him kill 8 men in one night, watched him lead 50 of us to freedom, watched him stand alone against an army. They shot him 37 times before he fell, 37 bullets, and he died with his eyes open looking north toward freedom. I am 88 years old. I was a slave for 84 of those years, and I stand here today a free man because of him, because he taught me that freedom is not given, it is taken. To every white person listening, we remember. Every cruelty, every wrong, every family torn apart, we will never forget. And to every black person listening, remember Goliath. Remember that one man can change everything. One man can inspire hundreds. One man can crack a system that looked unbreakable. They tried to erase him, tried to make us forget, but we did not forget. We carry his story in our bones, in our blood, in every breath we take as free people. Moses collapsed before he finished. His body gave out. He was carried to a doctor, a black doctor, one of the first in Virginia. The doctor examined him and shook his head. His heart was failing after years of strain. Days, maybe hours. Moses smiled when they told him, "Good, I have lived long enough. I saw slavery end. I saw us walk free. That is more than most of my people ever saw." He died that night in a bed, not a field, as a man, not property. More than 200 black people came to his funeral. They sang spirituals, the old coded songs once used to plan escapes and keep hope alive. And they sang a new song, one born in the mountains, from the maroon camps, from free people spreading across the South. The Ballad of Goliath. It said 7'6" he broke his chain, heard freedom call, killed 8 masters in one night, showed the South we stand and fight. They shot him down, but he did not fall. His spirit lives in one and all. Remember, brothers, remember well the giant who broke the gates of hell. Goliath, Goliath, say his name. Freedom cost blood, freedom costs flame. Goliath, Goliath, stand up tall. When one man rises, he breaks the wall. The song was never written, it did not need to be. It lived in voices, in memory, in a people who survived the impossible. It traveled from Virginia to the Carolinas, from Georgia to Mississippi, from Louisiana to Texas. Wherever freed people gathered, they sang of the giant who broke his chains. In 1872, a white journalist from New York came south to report on Reconstruction. While interviewing freed people, he heard the song. Curious, he asked where it came from. An old woman once enslaved in Alabama told him that was the song of Goliath, the giant from Virginia. You never heard of him? Of course not. White folks do not want you to know what one black man did when he decided he had suffered enough. She told the story. A man so tall he had to bend through doors, so strong he could carry what 3 men could not, bought like a horse, worked like a mule, forced to fight for entertainment. He never complained, never resisted. For 15 years he was the perfect slave. Then they sold his pregnant wife, used her as an experiment. She died giving birth. The baby died too, and something inside the giant shattered. He killed his master, killed the wife, killed the sons, killed the overseer, killed the doctor, killed the trader. 8 people in one night using only his hands and a broken chain. Then he led 50 people into the mountains. They lived free for 4 years while the militia hunted them. When they found him, he stood alone so the others could escape. One man against 200 soldiers. Shot 37 times. Still killed 20 before he died. Tell me, sir, is that the act of property, of an animal, or of a man who chose death over chains? The journalist wrote it all, sent it north. The paper refused. Too dangerous, too upsetting, he quit, printed it himself. Most copies were burned, some by angry whites in the South, some by people in the North who wanted to forget slavery. But a few survived, and in those few the story lived. In the 1920s, during the Harlem Renaissance, black artists reclaimed their voices. Langston Hughes heard the Ballad of Goliath in a speakeasy. An old man sang it crying. Hughes asked him about it. The man said his grandfather taught him. Born enslaved, freed in 1865, his grandfather had known Goliath, worked beside him. Said Goliath was quiet, thoughtful, sang African songs when alone. Everyone thought his power was in his size, but it was in his humanity, his refusal to accept being less than a man. When word spread of what he did, it was like lightning. Suddenly freedom felt possible. One by one slaves disappeared. The system began to crack. Decades later, those cracks became the Civil War. Hughes wrote a poem called The Giant. It was never published while he lived. Too violent, they said, but it survived. And one line said, they call him monster, beast, murderer, but I call him man, a man who said no more, a man who broke the door, a man who showed us how to turn night into day. They decided to carry out a deep study of slave rebellions in the state. They searched through court files, property lists, personal letters, journals, and newspaper stories from the 1850s. What they uncovered stunned them. In October 1856 at Blackwood Plantation, 8 people were killed in a single night. Property losses were estimated at $50,000, a massive sum at the time. The official record described it as a sad event caused by a mentally unstable slave. But the unofficial sources, private letters between plantation owners and diary notes from that era, revealed another version. They spoke of fear, of white families too scared to sleep, of tighter security, of deep suspicion. One letter from a plantation owner in a nearby county to his brother in Richmond said, "The Negro uprising at Blackwoods has shaken the whole area. 8 men are dead, including Cornelius himself. The slave, a man of unbelievable size, killed them with his bare hands and then led every slave on the land to freedom. A reward of $15,000 has been offered, the largest I've ever known, but I doubt they'll find him. The Negroes are hiding him. Even when threatened with death, they refuse to speak. I've doubled my guards and sleep with a pistol under my pillow. Margaret wants to go back to Richmond, but I cannot leave the plantation, not during harvest. Still, I admit, brother, I am afraid. If it happened at Blackwoods, it could happen here. The Negroes look at us differently now, as if they are judging us, weighing us. I fear we have been sitting on a powder keg for years, and Blackwood's giant just struck the match." The historians released their research in 2017. The paper was called The Blackwood Uprising: Forgotten Triggers of the American Civil War. Their argument was clear. The well-known slave rebellions like Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, and Gabriel's Revolt were not the only forces weakening slavery. Smaller uprisings and single acts of resistance, men like Goliath who rejected bondage, added up. They spread fear and hope, inspiring others. By 1860, the South was so unstable and so terrified that their slaves would kill them in their sleep that secession felt like the only answer. "Better to fight a war," one Southern leader wrote, "than to live every day in fear of our own property." The paper won awards and was quoted hundreds of times, but its greatest impact was restoring Goliath's story. Mainstream history had ignored him, hidden him away, acted as if he never lived. But he did live, and what he did mattered, shaping history in big and small ways. In 2019, a sculptor from Richmond suggested building a monument, a bronze statue 7 feet 6 inches tall showing Goliath snapping his chains. The idea caused instant debate. Some said he was a murderer and should not be celebrated. Others said he was a freedom fighter, and that you cannot condemn resistance while ignoring the violence of slavery itself. The argument lasted for months, filling city council meetings, public discussions, and newspaper opinion pages. In the end, a compromise was reached. The statue would be built, but not downtown. Instead, it would stand in Jackson Ward, a historic black neighborhood and the center of Richmond's black community. The unveiling happened on Juneteenth, 2021. More than 5,000 people came. Black families from all over Virginia, historians, activists, and descendants of enslaved people from Halifax County were there. The statue was powerful. Goliath stood tall, chains broken and dropping from his wrists, his face lifted, bold, proud, and free. At the base was an inscription: Goliath, born unknown, Africa, circa 1826, died October 1860, Blue Ridge Mountains, Virginia. I was never your property, I was only waiting. The crowd did not sing the national anthem or church hymns. They sang the Ballad of Goliath, a song that had survived 165 years of silence, passed from mouth to mouth, generation after generation. 7 feet 6 inches tall, he broke his chains and answered the call. A 96-year-old woman, descended from slaves who worked on a plantation near Blackwoods, placed flowers at the statue. My great-great-grandmother told my great-grandmother, she said. Who told my grandmother, who told my mother, who told me? Goliath was real, he lived, he fought, he died free. And because he died free, we could live free. That is worth remembering. That is worth honoring. Today, if you go to Halifax County, Virginia, you will not see any official tribute to Goliath. There is no marker, no plaque, no display in the local museum. Blackwood Plantation no longer exists. It burned that October night and was never rebuilt. The land was divided and sold. Now it holds farms, housing developments, and a Dollar General. But if you speak with the black residents of the county, the descendants of those who endured slavery, they will tell you about him. They will guide you to a place in the woods, a small clearing where tradition says Goliath lived for his final 3 years before the militia found him. Nothing remains there now, only trees and brush. But they say if you stand still, if you listen closely, you can still hear him, singing the Dinka songs of his childhood, songs of home, of freedom, of a river he would never see again. They say his spirit never left, that he still stands watch, guarding runaways who no longer need guarding, breaking chains that no longer exist. It is only a legend, of course, but legends matter because they carry truths that simple facts cannot hold. This is the story of Goliath, the 7'6" giant from Virginia who chose death over slavery, who killed 8 men in one night, who led 50 people to freedom, who stood alone against an army and died standing, never kneeling. History tried to erase him, to shrink him into nothing, to act as though he never lived. But he did live, and his legacy survives. It lives in every person who refuses injustice, in every act of resistance against oppression, in every voice that says enough. Goliath's chains are broken. His body has long turned to dust, but his spirit is eternal. It lives in everyone who hears his story and understands the lesson he left behind. You can imprison the body, but you cannot bind the soul. And when a soul decides it will be free, fully and truly free, there is no force on earth that can stop it. Not chains, not guns, not armies, nothing. This was Goliath's lesson, and 165 years after his death that lesson still echoes. It still inspires. It still reminds us that freedom is not given. It is taken when needed, with blood if required, with courage always, and with the unbreakable belief that we are human beings, not property, that we deserve dignity, that we deserve freedom, and that we will accept nothing less. Goliath taught Halifax County that truth in October 1856, and the world is still learning it today.